drugs.
Dr. Wen?
180 pills for one injury, it's not acceptable. This is a problem by drug companies. It's also a problem by doctors as well, and doctors have to own the problem. And we have to be careful ourselves about prescribing medications. There are new federal guidelines issued by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that doctors have to follow. We're starting in medical schools. We have to get all doctors to follow these guidelines, but we also have to get patients involved too. I urge for all patients to ask your doctor every single time, do I need this medication? What are the side effects? What are the alternatives? There is a culture of excess. I'm sure you see this, Dr. Gupta. It's not just what doctors are doing, but also patients expect a pill for every pain.
But, it's interesting. I was in a hospital, I had surgery, and I got great care, but the doctor at the end said to me, do you want 30 Percocet or 90? And I was like, I'm not sure I should be the one determining this. I don't know anything about this. I went for 30, and then as soon as I took a Percocet, I kind of wished I took 90. And I'm glad I didn't, because God knows what would have happened. But these guidelines you talked about, the CDC, my understanding is they just put out these guidelines this year. Why has it taken so long?
This is medical culture. It's taken so long because of all that marketing by drug companies, and I feel badly now. I mean, I'm an emergency physician. I prescribed so many patients so much opioids without thinking about what that could be doing to them in terms of causing overdose deaths, in terms of causing them to be addicted. I wish I could take it back, but that's why we have to start with doctors and with patients working together to stop this culture of excess.
Sanjay, has the medical community just been far behind on this?
I think they've been far behind, and there's lots of different reasons why. But what I think is sort of amazing is that much of this started about 30 years ago, back in 1986, with a single paper, a small paper of just 38 patients. And that paper, before that time, people were more judicious about using opiates. After that paper, the belief became that you could prescribe these indiscriminately, that the risk of addiction was low, that the risk of overdose was low. And I think it's what Dr. Wen, it's what myself, I know Dr. Drew Pinsky is here. We all learned that in medical school, that there really wasn't a perceived harm from this. Insurance companies loved it because it was cheaper to prescribe a pill than to put people through physical therapy and other things. Pharmaceutical companies loved it because they were selling more pills. And the doctors, I think, as Lena said, bought into this. I mean, we much of the blame is on our shoulders.
Jennifer was talking about limits. I want you to meet somebody else in our audience for whom at one point there really were no limits. Ray Lucas is here with us. Ray's a former NFL quarterback who at one point was taking, get this, up to 1,400 opioid pills a month. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it started from a football injury. Didn't have insurance. 300 turns into 600 before I knew it. $1,400 pills a month. And I was doing TV at the time, doing all the Jet stuff. I was a functioning addict.
You could function.
Functioning addict. The day before I would go on TV, I would stop taking the pills, do the show, and I could swear, as soon as my producer was in my ear saying 5, 4, the pain would rush back. So I would go downstairs, and I would take 15 pills right away. And before I got in my truck to go home, and I only live in Jersey, coming from New York, I would take 15 more pills. I mean, at my worst, I had taken 80 a day at one point, 40 a day. I mean, this was my life. And the funniest thing about I wanted Emmy that year. I mean, in reality, this is what I did on a daily basis for a year. Bankrupt my family, put my wife and kids through hell, and I tell my story, and I'm not ashamed because I think opiates have changed the face of what people think are addicts.
Right.
I'm an 8-year NFL veteran, graduated from Rutgers University, but I'm an addict, and I will always be that way. So, again, I think...
Even now that you're not using, you feel
100%. Yeah. And I don't wear it as, like I'm supposed to be ashamed of it. I wear it as a badge because I survived, and I overcame my addiction, and I tell my story to make sure people know out there that they can overcome it.
It's incredible. I mean, I think a lot of people don't really think about a functioning addict.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Ray, it's good to see you. I mean, you look well, but I think you'd probably agree that you probably had windows where you were functioning.
I mean, like I said, the day before, stopped taking the pills.
Yeah.
As soon as the show was over, for the next 3 days before my next show, 40 a day, 50 a day, easy.
But the rest of the time, there's denial. There's probably hiding of pills, things like that.
The funniest thing with me was I used to walk past a mirror. And, being a quarterback, we really like to look good and, be sexy and stuff. But I couldn't shave because the guy I looked at in the mirror wasn't the guy I knew.
Wow, right.
So that, like you said, functioning, it varies, but a lot of times I would just be nasty. not want to shower because I couldn't walk past a mirror.
Yeah, it's an interesting term, functioning addict. But still so much of the time is spent thinking about pills. You wake up in the morning, you're thinking about pills. You go to bed at night, you're thinking about pills. You're thinking about how you can continue.
And you need more and more.
And you need more and more because they're not giving you the same effect that they used to get. And also, again, it's not at some point about getting high anymore. It's about not feeling awful.
I want you to meet Marina Morella and her son Jesse. They're right here. 12 years ago, Jesse's experimental opioid drug use resulted in the loss of oxygen to his brain, 2 cardiac arrests, irreversible brain damage. He can't walk or eat by himself or talk. Maureen, thank you, and Jesse, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, first of all, to CNN for giving us a voice, because to save a child is to save a family, and this is beyond anything. The pain of the people that I've spoken to, it's beyond anything that we can imagine. Dr. Gupta, my question is, at 16, he began experimenting with opioids with friends, and we saw nothing. He remained clean-cut, all-American boy doing his activities. His GPA was high. So what are we missing is my first question. And secondly, is it inevitable that you become an addict if you're experimenting with opioids?
Great question.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm really sorry for everything. I have 3 kids myself. I think about it all the time. I think when you're a parent, certainly, I don't think you missed anything. I mean, I'm sure that you think about that and you question that, but these are things that can be easy to miss. I mean, because opiate addiction, opiate misuse is something that's not always obvious, certainly. And the developing brain, a brain that is not yet fully developed, is going to be more at risk of actually developing a habit of misuse or abuse. So 16 years old, obviously pretty young. It's hard to know what percentage of people become addicts. It's dependent on a lot of things, your biology, your environment, again, what age you start taking the pills. But the best studies show around 25 to 27% of people who take these could become addicts. In terms of how long it takes to become an addict, within 5 to 7 days, people can start to have withdrawal symptoms.
5 to 7 days.
5 to 7 days.
Which, if you're prescribed this stuff, I mean, you're prescribed it much more than 5 to 7 days.
Yeah, I mean, you got whatever number of Percocet. As Lena mentioned, the new guidelines from the CDC say just a few days after an operation or after trauma or
You've
something
seen
like
that
that.
with people.
Right, and that's why it's so important for us to start slow and start from the lowest amount possible. Not to give 180 pills, but to start with the lowest amount.
Has it just been, I mean, traditionally just easier for doctors? I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm just going after doctors, but to just kind of write out a prescription and then move on. You're busy, you got a lot of other patients to deal with.
That's a part of it, but it's also the expectation on the part of the patient, too.
They want something, they want it now.
Yeah, and if you fall down and you bruise your knee, you might have pain, but you don't need opioids. Opioids are in the same class of drugs as heroin, which are incredibly addictive, and that's one of the reasons why in Baltimore, for example, we've said that, look, we know that opioids are killing people, that there are more people dying every year from overdose than are dying from homicide, and so we've made our antidote medication available to every single resident in the city because we believe this is a life and death issue, and everyone needs to be able to save a life.
I want to introduce everybody to Celeste Chula's son. Celeste Chula is here. Her son is a recovering addict. He started using opioids in college, which then led to heroin. I know she's got a question for Dr. Wen. Celeste?
Dr. Wen, why is America afflicted with the opioid epidemic so disproportionately to the rest of the world?
It's so true. When you see those numbers, I mean, 5% of the population and 80-some-odd% of the opioid use.
You wonder, are Americans really in that much pain that we need to consume that many more opioids? And there is a problem that we have in this country where we do expect a solution. I go to schools in my city in Baltimore. I ask our high school students, do you think heroin is good or bad? Of course, they'll say heroin is bad. But if I ask them, are prescription painkillers good or bad? They won't know the answer because they see their parents and caregivers taking anti-anxiety pills every time they have an issue. And then they themselves get prescribed a medication every time they're acting up in class. So we have this culture of giving a pill for every problem, this culture of a quick fix, and that's something we have to change.
Where was the FDA, Sanjay, in all of this?
The FDA is in a tricky spot in many ways, Anderson. I mean, on one hand, they're constantly pushed to approve more drugs, to give patients more options. OxyContin was recently approved for children. I mean, that's a remarkable thing in light of this epidemic. Zohydro, another opiate analgesic, also approved. So on one hand, they say, look, we need to provide more options to people. On the other hand, they sort of admit that they've been acting very slowly. And they're starting to do things now, like put black box warnings on these medications. But as you mentioned earlier, that's just recently. And another thing I just want to mention about this culture of consumption we have in this country, this statistic blew me away, but 91% of people who overdose and survive are given another prescription for those opiates, typically by the same doctor that gave it to them in the first place.
That's incredible.
We're not only not making progress in that regard, we are turning a blind eye to the tragedy in front of us.
I want everybody to meet Tracy Budd. She lost her son to an accidental overdose. He became addicted after being prescribed Vicodin following a football shoulder injury. Tracy's daughter, she's also struggled with opioid addiction. She's 2 years clean as of 5 days ago. And we've just heard so many stories of kids being over-prescribed. You just talked about oxycodone for kids. I know Tracy has a question for Dr. Dupin. Tracy?
Dr. Wen, actually, I was wondering how you think that opioid prescriptions should differ for adolescents and adults.
It's a tricky question, and this is why medicine is both an art and a science. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. We have to tailor the treatment to each person, depending on their age, depending on what it is that they have. If an adolescent were in a bad car accident, they might need opioids. And I want to clarify that, too, that there are appropriate usages of opioid medications. And doctors, for the vast majority of doctors, want to do the right thing and are horrified, like myself, when we know of our own practices. That's why there are guidelines in place. I believe that the guidelines should be even stronger in saying that we should be very careful about prescribing opioids and also getting Narcan, the antidote medication, available to every single person who is at risk, which could be everyone.
Sanjay, I read the statistic, and I was blown away by it. In 2014, 168,000 kids aged 12 to 17 had an addiction to prescription pills.
It is a remarkable statistic, and they're getting these pills in all sorts of different ways. As Dr. Wen mentioned, sometimes, for legitimate reasons, there can be legitimate pain that warrants a prescription for a short period of time. But a lot of times they're getting it through the process of what is known as diversion. They're getting it from other people's prescriptions, either their parents or friends, parents, whoever it may be. And again, because it's a prescription medication, I think the level of awareness and the level of concern has been lower than it should be. You think, well, this isn't heroin, it's not cocaine. How bad could it be? We're now seeing it.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break. Just had one of the thorniest issues at the crux of the deadly opioid epidemic. Doctors deeply divided over whether to prescribe these powerful painkillers. Some want strict limits, while others argue limits will mean debilitating pain for people who have chronic pain conditions. Plus, a solution that could save tens of thousands of lives every year when prescription addiction made in the USA continues.